The view suits my lifestyle better. Olivia's voice dripped with condescension as she peered down from her wraparound balcony. Besides, someone needs to be close to the entrance to accept all those Amazon deliveries. I stood in the courtyard of the Hamilton, our family's historic apartment building, trying to maintain my composure as my sister flaunted her new penthouse. The same penthouse that should have been split between us after Dad's retirement. My name is Sarah Hamilton, and at 29, I just watched my parents hand over our family's crown jewel to my younger sister while I got stuck with what they called a generous gift, a cramped ground floor studio that hadn't been renovated since the 1980s. Now, girls, Mom intervened, her voice carrying that familiar placating tone she always used when Olivia pushed too far. You both got lovely apartments. The Hamilton has been in our family for generations, and now you each have a piece of that history. A piece, right? Olivia got the $2 million, 3,000 square foot piece with panoramic city views, while I got the 500 square foot afterthought that shared a wall with the garbage room. Don't forget to water the courtyard plants, Sarah, Olivia called out, disappearing back into her perfect apartment. Since you're right there and all. I gripped the keys to my new home so tight they left marks in my palm. The worst part wasn't even the unfairness of it all. It was how everyone acted like this was completely normal. Like, of course, the younger, more outgoing, more successful sister deserved the penthouse. Never mind that I'd spent the last 5 years managing the building's operations while Olivia was busy finding herself through a series of failed startup ventures that our parents kept funding. The Hamilton wasn't just any building. Constructed in 1923, it was one of the city's first luxury apartment buildings, commissioned by my great-grandfather, James Hamilton. Its Art Deco facade and ornate lobby had been featured in architectural magazines, and its residents included some of the city's most prominent families. For generations, the penthouse had been the Hamilton family residence, passed down from one caretaker to the next. Until now. Sarah, honey, Mom touched my arm gently, pulling me from my thoughts. Why don't we go see about getting you settled in? I bought some lovely curtains that would brighten up your space. My space. All 500 square feet of it, with its view of the dumpsters and the constant rumble of the building's ancient boiler through the thin walls. But I forced a smile because that's what I always did. Keep the peace, don't rock the boat, be grateful for what you get. Sure, Mom, I said, following her toward my new apartment, though I think it might take more than curtains. The studio was exactly as I remembered from the initial walkthrough, dingy beige walls, scratched parquet flooring, and a kitchenette that looked like it had been installed when Reagan was president. The previous tenant had been our longtime maintenance man, Mr. Sullivan, who lived here rent-free as part of his compensation. After he retired last month, my parents had the brilliant idea to gift it to me. It has so much potential, Mom said brightly, running her hand along the dusty windowsill. And think of the convenience. You're right here if any residents need assistance. Of course. Because even with this generous gift, I was still expected to manage the building. Meanwhile, Olivia would be hosting rooftop parties and posting Instagram stories about our amazing downtown views. Mom, I started, trying to keep my voice steady. Can we talk about why Olivia got the penthouse? I've been managing this building for 5 years. I know every resident, every maintenance issue, every detail of its history. Oh, honey, Mom cut me off with that dismissive wave I knew so well. You know your sister needs the space for entertaining. Her connections are so important for the building's image. And she's always been more social. Social. Right, because throwing parties with Dad's money and documenting it all on social media counted as a career these days. Besides, Mom continued, avoiding my gaze as she fussed with the curtains. After that unfortunate incident with the Thompson's water leak, your father thought it best to have you closer to ground level. The Thompson incident. 3 months ago, a pipe had burst in one of our luxury units, causing significant damage. I handled the crisis efficiently, got emergency repairs done within hours, but apparently, that wasn't good enough. One complaint from Mrs. Thompson about the response time, and suddenly, I was incompetent. Never mind that I prevented 3 other major disasters this year alone, or that our occupancy rate was the highest it had been in a decade under my management. One mistake, and I was relegated to the ground floor while Olivia, who couldn't tell a circuit breaker from a light switch, got the penthouse. I was about to argue further when my phone buzzed, a text from Mr. Chen, and 3B out of stuck elevator. Perfect timing. Duty calls, I said, already heading for the door. Thanks for the curtains, Mom. Oh, and Sarah, Mom called after me. Don't forget the building's centennial celebration is next month. Your sister's handling the planning, but she might need some logistical support. Of course she was, because planning parties was apparently more valuable than actually running the building. The next few days passed in a blur of moving boxes and resident complaints. Every time I heard the elevator stop at the top floor, carrying another delivery of furniture or decor for Olivia's vision, I felt my resentment grow. But I buried myself in work, doing what I'd always done, being the responsible one, the reliable one, the one who kept things running while others took the credit. It wasn't until Friday evening, after dealing with a plumbing emergency in 4C, that I finally had a moment to really look at my new apartment. The space was small but had good bones, high ceilings, original moldings, and a bay window that, while facing the alley, let in decent light. With some work, it could be not horrible. I was examining a crack in the bathroom tile when something caught my eye, a slight discoloration in the wall near the baseboards. Crouching down, I ran my fingers along the edge and felt a draft. The wall was hollow there, which wasn't right for an exterior wall. Curious, I grabbed a flashlight from my toolkit and examined the area more closely. The baseboard seemed looser than it should be, and when I applied gentle pressure, it moved slightly. Heart racing, I carefully pried it away from the wall. Behind it was a small cavity, and inside, a leather-bound book. My hands trembled as I pulled it out. The cover was worn but well preserved, and when I opened it, I found myself looking at my great-grandfather's handwriting. It was his journal, dated 1923, the year the Hamilton was built. My dearest Elizabeth, the first entry began. I've hidden this journal where I hope you'll find it, in the apartment that was meant to be your sanctuary. I sat back against the wall, my mind spinning. Elizabeth had been my great-grandmother, but according to family history, she'd never lived in the building. She died before construction was completed, or so we'd been told. But as I read on, a different story emerged. A story of love, betrayal, and a secret that had been buried in these walls for nearly a century. A loud thump from above, probably Olivia rearranging her imported furniture again, jolted me back to the present. I quickly took photos of several pages, then carefully returned the journal to its hiding place. Something told me I should keep this discovery to myself, at least for now. My phone buzzed again, another text from Olivia. Emergency meeting tomorrow about the centennial. Don't be late, and wear something presentable. I looked around my tiny studio, at the boxes still waiting to be unpacked, at the crack in the tile that had led me to this discovery. Maybe being relegated to the ground floor wasn't a punishment after all. Maybe it was exactly where I needed to be. The next morning, I arrived at the Penthouse exactly on time, wearing my most presentable outfit, a charcoal gray pantsuit that had served me well through countless resident meetings. Olivia opened the door wearing what appeared to be loungewear that probably cost more than my monthly salary. Finally, she said, ushering me into her immaculately decorated living room. Mom and Dad are on their way up. We need to finalize the centennial plans. The penthouse had been transformed in just a few days, gone were the classic furnishings that had given the space its timeless elegance. In their place was an explosion of modern luxury, all chrome, glass, and white leather. Our great-grandfather would have had a heart attack. Now, Olivia continued, pulling out a tablet, I'm thinking we showcase the building's evolution. Out with the old, in with the new. Maybe even announce some modernization plans. Modernization. I interrupted. The Hamilton is a historic landmark. We can't just. Oh, don't be so stuck in the past. She waved off my concern. Nobody wants to live in a museum. We need to attract the right kind of residents. The right kind. Like the social media influencer she'd approved for 5 last month, who'd already received 3 noise complaints. Before I could argue further, our parents arrived, Dad beaming with pride as he took in Olivia's decorating choices. Stunning, he declared. You've really brought this place into the 21st century, sweetheart. I thought about the journal hidden in my wall, about the history they were so eager to erase. But I held my tongue, watching as Olivia unveiled her grand vision for the centennial celebration. It would be quite a party, I had to admit. She thought of everything, catering, entertainment, even a documentary crew to capture the transformation of the Hamilton. Everything except. What about the time capsule? I asked quietly. They all turned to look at me. What time capsule? Olivia asked, frowning. I took a deep breath. The one great-grandfather sealed in the foundation stone. It's supposed to be opened at the centennial. How do you know about that? Dad demanded. Because I actually read the building's historical documents, I replied. It's mentioned in the original blueprints. There's supposed to be a ceremony. Perfect. Olivia clapped her hands. We'll make it part of the celebration. A little historical touch before we unveil the modernization plans. If she only knew what I found in my walls, what secrets this building held. But looking at their excited faces, I realized they weren't ready for the truth. Not yet. The time capsule would be opened at the centennial, and with it, everything they thought they knew of the Hamilton and our family would change forever. I just had to wait one more month. The next 4 weeks passed in a whirlwind of preparation for the centennial celebration. While Olivia orchestrated her grand vision from the penthouse, I juggled my regular building management duties with an increasingly urgent secret mission, deciphering my great-grandfather's journal. Each night, after handling the day's maintenance requests and resident concerns, I carefully extracted the leather-bound book from its hiding place and lost myself in its pages. The story that emerged was far different from the sanitized family history we'd been taught. Elizabeth deserves more than a footnote in our legacy, one entry read. This building was her dream, her design. While others see only my name on the deed, I know the truth. The Hamilton stands as a testament to her brilliance, even if the world will never know. Elizabeth, it turned out, had been an architect at a time when women weren't welcome in the profession. She had designed the Hamilton in secret, using my great-grandfather's name to get the plans approved. The ground floor studio, my studio, had been her private workspace where she had drafted the innovations that made the building revolutionary for its time. Mr. Harrison, please move the blueprint meeting to next week. Olivia's voice carried through my door, interrupting my reading. The party planner needs to discuss the ice sculpture placement. I quickly hid the journal and opened my laptop, pretending to review maintenance schedules as my sister barged in without knocking. Sarah, we need to talk about the centennial's opening ceremony, she announced, perching herself on the edge of my desk. Dad wants you to say a few words about the building's operations before I unveil the modernization plans. A few words. I echoed. You mean like how we're planning to gut a historic landmark? Olivia rolled her eyes. Don't be dramatic. We're not gutting it. We're updating it. The residents want modern amenities. Have you actually asked them? I challenged. Because Mrs. Rodriguez Intua loves her original tile work and the Paddles specifically chose their unit for its historical features. Those aren't the kind of residents we're trying to attract anymore, she said dismissively. The future of the Hamilton is luxury living, not nostalgia. The future of the Hamilton. If she only knew what was in that time capsule. Fine, I said, keeping my voice neutral. I'll say a few words, but I want to handle the time capsule opening myself. Why? She asked, suddenly suspicious. Because I'm the one who found the original documentation about it, I replied smoothly. I know the exact location and the proper extraction procedure. Olivia shrugged. Whatever. Just make sure you wear something appropriate. This isn't a maintenance call. After she left, I pulled out my phone and called the one person who might understand what I'd discovered. Professor Martinez, it's Sarah Hamilton. I need your expertise on something historical. The architectural historian had consulted on the Hamilton's landmark certification years ago. If anyone could verify what I found in the journal, it was her. We met the next day at a cafe far from the building. I brought photographs of key journal pages and the original blueprints I'd found in the building's archives. Extraordinary, Professor Martinez breathed, examining the documents. These design elements, they were decades ahead of their time. And you say Elizabeth Hamilton designed all of this? I nodded, but our family records barely mention her. According to the journal, she died before the building was completed. That's not quite accurate, the professor said, pulling out her tablet. Look at this. She showed me a newspaper clipping from 1924. Elizabeth Hamilton was very much alive when the Hamilton opened, but she wasn't at the ceremony. Instead, she was in Paris, accepting an anonymous architecture prize for innovative urban design. The submission was under a male pseudonym, Professor Martinez explained. But the committee eventually discovered her identity. It caused quite a scandal at the time. And the time capsule? I asked. The journal mentioned something important inside, but not what it is. The professor's eyes sparkled. That's the most interesting part. According to my research, Elizabeth insisted on sealing it herself. Only she and your great-grandfather knew its contents. I thought about Olivia's modernization plans, about how eager my family was to erase the past. The centennial is in 3 days, I said. Whatever's in that capsule, I need to make sure it comes out properly. Be careful, Professor Martinez warned. Historical revelations have a way of making people uncomfortable. The day before the centennial, I watched from my window as workers transformed the Hamilton's courtyard into Olivia's vision of modern luxury. Crystal chandeliers hung from temporary pavilions, and an ice bar was being carved with our family crest. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom. Final planning meeting in the penthouse. Don't be late. Upstairs, Olivia was in her element, directing staff and gesturing animatedly at mood boards. Our parents sat on her pristine white sofa, beaming with pride. Tomorrow, she announced, we celebrate not just the Hamiltons' past, but its future. After the time capsule ceremony, I'll unveil the plans for our complete renovation. We're talking smart home integration, a rooftop infinity pool, and converting some of the larger units into luxury short-term rentals. Short-term rentals? I interrupted. That would mean evicting half our long-term residents. We'll offer them fair compensation, Dad said firmly. The building needs to evolve. I thought about Mrs. Rodriguez, who lived here for 40 years, about the Penthouse children who had grown up in these halls, about Elizabeth's vision of a true community, not just a profit center. And what about the building's historic status? I asked. Already handled, Olivia smirked. The Landmarks Commission is reviewing our proposal. Apparently, they're very interested in sustainable luxury development these days. I caught her meaning. Money had changed hands, deals had been made. The Hamilton's soul was being sold to the highest bidder. Now, she continued, about tomorrow's schedule. Sarah, you'll oversee the time capsule extraction at 2 p.m. sharp. Keep your remarks brief. We don't want to bore the guests with maintenance talk. If she only knew what was coming. That night, I made one final visit to my great-grandmother's hidden workspace. The journal's last entry was dated the day before the Hamiltons' grand opening. My dearest James, by the time you read this, I'll be on my way to Paris. I cannot stand by and watch as others take credit for our dream. But I leave you with proof of the truth, sealed in the foundation where it all began. When the time is right, let our legacy speak for itself. All my love, Elizabeth. I carefully returned the journal to its hiding place. Tomorrow, Elizabeth Hamilton's voice would finally be heard, and my sister's perfect plans would never be the same. The morning of the centennial celebration arrived with perfect weather and impeccable timing, both courtesy of Olivia's meticulous planning. By noon, the Hamiltons' courtyard was filled with the city's elite, all eager to be part of what my sister had branded as the social event of the season. I watched from my ground floor window as caterers scurried about, setting up elaborate displays under crystal-draped pavilions. The ice sculptor was putting the final touches on what appeared to be a modernist interpretation of our family crest, while photographers circled like well-dressed vultures, documenting every detail. Sarah, Mom's voice crackled through my phone. Where are you? The time capsule ceremony is in 2 hours, and you haven't even had your hair done. I'm preparing the extraction site, I replied calmly, though my heart was racing. There's a specific procedure we need to follow. Well, hurry up. Your sister has the governor's wife waiting to meet you. I hung up and turned to Professor Martinez, who was carefully examining the foundation stone with specialized equipment. Are we ready? She nodded, pointing to a slight discoloration in the granite. The cavity is exactly where your great-grandmother's notes indicated. Whatever's in there has been perfectly preserved. We had arrived at dawn, long before the party preparations began, to ensure everything was in place. The professor had brought ground-penetrating radar and other tools to confirm the capsule's location and condition. Now, all we had to do was wait. Remember, she whispered, once it's opened, there's no going back. Are you sure you want to do this? I thought about Olivia's renovation plans, about the families who would be displaced, about Elizabeth's hidden legacy. Absolutely. At 1:45 p.m., guests began gathering around the ceremonial site. Olivia held court from a raised platform, resplendent in a designer dress that probably cost more than my annual salary. Our parents stood beside her, Dad practically bursting with pride as she charmed the crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, she began, her voice carrying across the courtyard. Today we celebrate not just a building, but a vision. The Hamilton has stood as a symbol of luxury and excellence for a century, and today we begin its journey into the next 100 years. The crowd applauded politely. I noticed Mrs. Rodriguez watching from her second-floor window, concern etched on her face. She knew, as did many of our long-term residents, that Olivia's vision meant the end of their homes. And now, Olivia continued, my sister Sarah, our building manager, will oversee the opening of the time capsule placed by our great-grandfather, James Hamilton, himself. I stepped forward, dressed not in the cocktail attire Olivia had demanded, but in a replica of a 1920s women's business suit, a detail only Professor Martinez would appreciate. Before we begin, I set my voice steady. I'd like to share something about the Hamiltons' true history. Olivia's smile faltered slightly. This wasn't part of her script. 100 years ago, this building was more than just another luxury development. It was revolutionary, the first in the city to incorporate natural ventilation, the first to feature built-in electrical systems, the first to consider both form and function in equal measure. I saw Dad checking his watch, but I continued. These innovations weren't just architectural choices. They were the vision of someone who understood that true luxury isn't about exclusivity. It's about creating spaces where people can thrive. Professor Martinez stepped forward with her team, beginning the careful extraction process. The crowd leaned in, cameras flashing. For a century, we've credited James Hamilton with these innovations. But today, we're going to meet the real architect of the Hamilton. The capsule emerged, a bronze box, perfectly preserved. My hands trembled slightly as I accepted it. Inside this box, I announced, is the truth about who really designed this building, about why it was built the way it was, about the legacy we're so eager to erase. Sarah, Olivia hissed. Stick to the program. But I was already opening the box. Inside, exactly as the journal had described, lay a stack of original blueprints, hand-drawn and signed with Elizabeth Hamilton's name. With them were photographs of Elizabeth at construction sites, detailed notes in her handwriting, and newspaper clippings about mysterious, anonymous architectural innovations. And at the bottom, a letter addressed to the future. My dearest grandchildren, I read aloud, my voice carrying in the sudden silence. If you're reading this, a century has passed since I dared to dream of building something extraordinary. Society told me I couldn't be an architect, that my place was in the home, not designing them. So I built both. This building was my home, my workshop, my sanctuary. I looked up at Olivia, whose perfect composure had cracked. Our parents stood frozen, Dad's face draining of color as he recognized his grandmother's handwriting. The Hamilton was never meant to be just another monument to wealth. I continued reading. It was designed to be a community where families could grow, where innovation served purpose, where luxury meant more than just expensive finishes. Professor Martinez was already examining the blueprints, exclaiming over details that proved their authenticity. Journalists in the crowd were furiously taking notes. And so, I read the final lines. I leave these proofs of my work not to claim glory, but to remind you that true vision doesn't destroy, it builds. It doesn't exclude, it welcomes. It doesn't erase the past, it learns from it. The silence that followed was deafening. Then, from her window, Mrs. Rodriguez began to applaud. Others joined in, the Paddles, the Sullivans, all the residents who understood what the Hamilton really meant. Olivia grabbed my arm, her nails digging in. Do you have any idea what you've just done? I met her gaze steadily. I've protected our real legacy. Your renovation plans would destroy everything Elizabeth Hamilton built. Those plans are already in motion, she hissed. The contracts are signed. Actually, Professor Martinez interrupted, holding up one of the blueprints. They're not. These original plans just confirm the Hamilton's historical significance. Any major alterations would now require extensive review and approval. I watched my sister's perfect world crumble as reporters swarmed around us, asking questions about Elizabeth Hamilton, about the building's innovative design, about its architectural significance. Our parents stood shell-shocked on the platform, their carefully constructed narrative about the Hamilton dynasty falling apart around them. But as I held Elizabeth's letter, watching the sunlight play through the courtyard she designed so carefully, I knew I'd done the right thing. The Hamilton would survive, not as Olivia's modernist showcase, but as exactly what it was meant to be, a home. 1 month after the centennial celebration, I sat in my ground floor studio, no, Elizabeth's studio, reviewing the changes that had swept through the Hamilton like a cleansing storm. The Landmark Commission had not only rejected Olivia's renovation plans, but had also upgraded the building's historical status, ensuring its preservation. The publicity surrounding Elizabeth Hamilton's discovery had transformed our outdated building into one of the city's most sought-after addresses, with potential residents specifically requesting original features. The Historical Society called again, Mrs. Rodriguez said, bringing me a cup of coffee. She had become the building's unofficial historian, delighting in sharing Elizabeth's story with visitors. They want to create a permanent exhibition of female architects of the 1920s. I nodded, glancing around at what we had uncovered. My small studio had been restored to its original state, with Elizabeth's drafting table taking pride of place by the bay window. The wall where I had found the journal now hosted a collection of her original sketches, protected behind museum-grade glass. Olivia had moved out of the penthouse 2 weeks after the centennial. This building's atmosphere no longer aligns with my brand, she had announced, as if she were leaving by choice rather than necessity. She had relocated to a sleek high-rise across town, where she could have all the modern amenities she wanted. Mom and Dad had taken longer to come around, but the weight of history and public opinion had forced them to accept the truth. Dad had stepped down from building management entirely, leaving me in charge of both operations and legacy preservation. Sarah? Mrs. Patel's voice came from the doorway. The architecture students are here for the tour. I smiled, gathering my materials. Twice a week, I led groups through the Hamilton, sharing not just its architectural innovations but the story of the woman who had dared to design them. Elizabeth's studio had become the starting point, a reminder that sometimes the greatest legacies start from the ground up. My phone buzzed. A text from Olivia. Dad's birthday dinner next week. Try to dress appropriately this time. Some things hadn't changed. But now, when my family gathered, the power dynamic had shifted. I was no longer the overlooked daughter relegated to the background. Elizabeth's story had become my story, and the Hamilton's true heritage had become my responsibility. As I led the students through the building, pointing out the innovative features that had been decades ahead of their time, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the original brass elevator doors. I was wearing a vintage-inspired suit, similar to the ones in Elizabeth's photographs. Sometimes, I imagined I could feel her presence in these halls, silently approving of how her sanctuary had been preserved. The Hamilton was never just about luxury, I told the students as we reached the rooftop garden, another of Elizabeth's forward-thinking designs. It was about creating a space where innovation and community could thrive together, where everyone, regardless of their position, had a place. Later that evening, as I sat at Elizabeth's drafting table reviewing renovation proposals for historical preservation, I found myself thinking about legacy, not the kind measured in square footage or property values, but the kind built on truth and purpose. The ground floor studio that was meant to diminish me had instead elevated me. The history my family had tried to bury had become our greatest asset, and Elizabeth's hidden legacy had finally found its voice. I opened her journal one last time, reading the words that had changed everything. Remember, my dear grandchildren, true worth isn't measured by how high you climb, but by how strongly you build your foundation. Looking out at the courtyard, where the Hamilton's heart still beat strongly, I knew she would be proud. Sometimes the best view isn't from the top, it's from exactly where you're meant to be.